I made a decision that defied my ancestors. I refused the prince's marriage proposal and married a stable boy. Everyone said I had lost my mind. Only the prince breathed a sigh of relief. In my previous life, he and I were the emperor and empress, deeply in love. After he died, I followed him in death due to my overwhelming grief. I thought this life would be perfect. But at the bridge of forgetfulness, I heard him reveal his true feelings. Chui Mingyue comes from a prestigious family. I had no choice but to marry her. If not for this karmic bond, I would never have betrayed my true love. If there is a next life, I will never repeat this mistake. Thus, after we were reborn, I decided to fulfill his wish and sever this karmic bond with my own hands. Chapter 1. On the day I died, the new emperor presented Peiyu's will. Empress Chui has lost her virtue and is stripped of her title, demoted to a concubine. After her death, she shall not be buried in the imperial mausoleum but in North Mountain, and her descendants shall not be allowed to worship her. At her funeral, her face shall be covered with her hair, her mouth filled with rice bran, and all funeral rites shall be kept simple. With each word, my face grew paler. We were a young couple, the envy of all for our loving marriage. I couldn't understand why, until I reached the bridge of forgetfulness. Hiding behind the stone of 3 lives, I heard his bitter accusations. Chui Mingyue came from a prestigious family. I had no choice but to marry her. I had been betrothed to Jingzhu since childhood, but because of Chui Mingyue's existence, I had to force her to become a concubine, which ultimately led to her depression and death. If not for this fateful encounter, I would never have betrayed my true love. If there is a next life, I will never repeat this mistake. Shin Jingzhu? I thought about it for a long time and vaguely recalled that there was indeed such a person in the harem. She was gentle and reserved, frail in health, and rarely appeared before me. So I didn't remember her appearance. I only remembered it was Peiyu's decree. He said she was of low birth and need not pay her respects in the future, lest she defile the empress's eyes. At the time, I was filled with confusion and even coldly ignored him for 3 days. But I never imagined that I was the fool. I wanted to rush out and confront him, demanding why he treated me this way. But my mouth was filled with rice bran, and I could not speak. Tears fell into my mouth, bitter and despairing. It turns out that even after death, the heart still feels pain. Miss, you've just recovered from your illness. You shouldn't be exposed to the wind. Let me help you back to your tent to rest for a while. When I opened my eyes again, the maidservant Xiao Tao was looking at me with concern. Before I could respond, a harsh voice came from behind me. Chui Mingyue, how useless you are. Not only did you let a servant steal your spotlight, but you also ended up looking so disheveled. My breath caught. The person snorted twice. How pitiful. You were about to marry into the Eastern Palace. Yet the prince has changed his heart at this very moment. What good is being born into the Chui family? Do you really think all the good things in the world are meant for you? Before I could react, a commotion erupted in the crowd. At the hunting ground, Peiyu lowered his gaze, looking at the pink-clad woman beside him with affection. This is a tamed snow fox. Its fur is warm, hold it, and you won't feel cold. The woman in pink blushed shyly. It was Shin Jingzhu. Watching the two of them standing side by side, I finally realized Peiyu and I had been reborn together. In our previous life, during the autumn hunt, this snow fox had been specially brought from the snow-capped mountains for me. He said it was to be our token of love. Now he was using it to flatter another woman. How ridiculous. As I pondered, Shin Jingzhu turned her head, revealing most of her right cheek. Just one glance. I froze in place. I didn't recognize Shin Jingzhu, but I recognized that face. In my previous life, There was a favored eunuch by Peiyu's side. He looked exactly like this. Even the small red mole on the tip of his nose was identical. At that time, Peiyu had just ascended the throne, and state affairs were busy, so he rarely came to the harem. I was worried about his health, so I prepared a nourishing soup and sent it to him. Just then, I happened to see the young eunuch rushing out of the sleeping quarters with his clothes disheveled. Peiyu scolded me angrily. "You clumsy fool! You can't even serve tea properly. You spilled it all over me." I followed his finger and looked down. The hem of his robe was indeed soaked. I believed him at the time. But now, looking back, Peiyu's face was flushed red, clearly having just been with someone. Perhaps my gaze was too cold. Peiyu seemed to sense it. He suddenly looked up. Through the crowd, he looked over at me. Our eyes met. He paused for a moment, and disgust slowly crept onto his brows. I remained calm, silently turning away. Once I no longer felt his gaze, I finally exhaled heavily. As expected, when two people despise each other, every extra glance is torture. I didn't expect it. Shinjingzhu suddenly rushed over and knelt down before me. She crawled to my feet, her voice filled with sorrow. "This lowly servant knows her place and is unworthy to stand and speak with Miss Cui." My brows furrowed. I was about to step aside, but she clutched tightly to the hem of my skirt. A hint of triumph flashed across her face. She pleaded, "But there are some things I must say. I have always admired His Highness and only wish to be by his side, even if it means having no name or status." Anger surged within me, and I pushed her away. "Who you admire is none of my concern." Shinjingzhu froze, her words hesitant. "But you and the prince are a perfect match. And you are the emperor's chosen bride for the crown prince. That's why I—" "Stop talking nonsense," I shouted at her. "A woman's virtue is of utmost importance. How dare you speak such nonsense here? When did the emperor issue an edict granting this marriage? How come I don't know? Falsely claiming to speak for the emperor is a capital offense." She was startled and collapsed to the ground. She panicked and defended herself. "I didn't mean it that way." "Enough." Peiyu's eyes were filled with anger as he pulled her behind him. "Cui Mingyue, if you have a grudge against me, take it out on me. Why are you making things difficult for Jing Shu? Why should I be angry?" He glared at me warningly but said nothing. I suppressed a smile and asked unexpectedly, "Moreover, I am the legitimate daughter of the Cui family, raised with proper etiquette, taught by distinguished masters, and well-versed in propriety and shame. My maternal grandfather was a founding general with distinguished military merits, honored in the ancestral temple." The prince told me, "Why would I trouble a mere servant?" As she finished speaking, Peiyu's face turned pale in an instant. The mirror of time can rewind a person's life. It can also reveal a person's inner demons and obsessions. By the bridge of forgetfulness, I obtained the answer I sought. In my previous life, Peiyu was forced to marry me, yet he came to despise me. It was because of this, and this reason. He knew it deep down. A sharp, high-pitched voice echoed. The emperor had arrived. Everyone knelt down and paid their respects. Once he took his seat, he asked about the hunting expedition. Peiyu hurried forward to respond. "Your Majesty, the number of game I have hunted is the greatest." Upon hearing this, the emperor smiled. "Good. You shall be rewarded." Peiyu couldn't contain his joy and lifted his robe to kneel down. I beat him to it and bowed down first. I pleaded earnestly, "Your Majesty, this servant believes that the prince has reached marriageable age and should be rewarded with a heavenly match." The surroundings fell silent. Everyone looked at us with strange expressions. Peiyu's face turned red, and he hesitated to speak. I pretended not to notice. The emperor smiled and asked, "Is Mingyue eager to marry?" I was about to shake my head. My gaze suddenly froze. A face with sharp features came into view. This person was dressed in coarse cloth. He was dressed as a stable boy. Tall and imposing, he stood behind the crowd, unnoticed. But his eyes were deep and piercing, as if they could see straight into one's soul. Fragmented images flashed through my mind. I couldn't help but furrow my brows. This face was so familiar. Where had I seen it before? Before I could think further, the emperor laughed heartily. Enough. I won't tease you anymore. Since Mingyue has brought it up herself, I shall grant you marriage to the crown prince. Father, your majesty. Peiyu and I spoke at the same time. He clenched his fingers tightly, his expression turning grim. He withdrew his gaze. I bowed once more and spoke aloud. The crown prince and Miss Shin are a match made in heaven, a union ordained by the heavens. I beg your majesty to grant them marriage. The hunting ground was vast and open. The sound carried far on the wind. For a moment, the entire crowd fell silent. I didn't know how much time had passed. A displeased voice rang out from above. You don't want to marry the crown prince because he broke your heart? Don't be afraid. Just say the words, and I will decide for you. A lowly servant girl dares to seek entry into the Eastern Palace? She must first obtain my permission. Xinjing Zhu, hiding behind Peiyu, turned pale. She looked to the man in front of her for help, but she saw him clenching his fists tightly, his gaze as sharp as a knife, fixed on me. But I paid him no mind. Instead, I glanced toward the corner again. Suddenly, something flashed through my mind. My eyes lit up. It was him. Perhaps my gaze was too direct. The emperor followed my line of sight. The stable boy had already lowered his head, hiding his face behind the horse. The emperor glanced at him briefly before looking away. He cleared his throat, feigning displeasure, and said, "Is the object of Mingyue's affection a mere stable boy?" I was still lost in thought. The face before me slowly merged with the one in my memories. Hearing the emperor's question, I instinctively replied, "Yes, it's him." As soon as the words left my mouth, the entire hall was filled with shock. Only Crown Prince Peiyu sighed in relief. He hurried forward, kneeling 3 steps away from me. He spoke earnestly to the emperor. "Father, both I and the woman of the Chui clan have found our true love. If we are forced together, it will only add another pair of star-crossed lovers to this world. Father, you were once young as well. You must understand my thoughts and feelings. Your son does not wish to miss out on the one he loves and regret it for the rest of his life. Please grant us your blessing." Every word was like a thunderclap. It moved everyone to tears. But he had forgotten. When the emperor was young, he had once secretly pledged his love to a palace maid. Later, he personally executed that palace maid and then married the eldest daughter of the chancellor as his empress. That was the mother of the crown prince, Shin Shi. Thus, the once unloved prince ascended the throne. The fact that the blood of his former lover paved the way to imperial power was his Achilles heel. The crown prince's words had struck the emperor's most vulnerable spot. As the wine cup was thrown, Peiyu hurriedly dodged to the side. I was very close to him. He could dodge, but I couldn't. The flying stone was about to hit my face. Everything went blurry before my eyes. My father rushed over and blocked me just in time. His hand came down. The crisp sound of a slap mixed with his angry curses. "Rebellious daughter. Marriage is a matter decided by one's parents. How dare you speak such nonsense?" Before anyone noticed, he lowered his voice and signaled to me. "Even if the crown prince is a fool, he is still the emperor's own son. Why are you causing trouble? Do you want to die?" He then turned and knelt down, disregarding his dignity, and cried out to the higher-ups. "Your Majesty, this old servant has sinned. I have raised such a disobedient daughter. I am an old man with only this one child. Her mother spoiled her rotten, making her arrogant and ignorant of the world. Such a stubborn girl is unworthy of the position of crown princess. I am deeply ashamed and unworthy of the emperor's kindness. I will voluntarily resign from my position as crown prince's tutor and retire to reflect on my mistakes. My father once said that the crown prince has no ambition and has long refused to serve as his tutor. The Chui family is a renowned clan with a century-old reputation, boasting numerous disciples. From the emperor to the lowest commoner, a single call from them can stir the masses. Pei Yu, who has been emperor for over a decade, knows this well. The one seeking to climb higher was never me. In just a single day, rumors spread like wildfire through the streets and alleys. The crown prince, for the sake of his wet nurse's daughter, dared to defy the emperor and was confined to his quarters. The emperor issued an edict: when you have come to your senses, you may come see me. That night, despite being confined to his quarters, Pei Yu, cloaked in moonlight, climbed over the wall and entered my courtyard. As soon as we met, he said, "Chui Mingyue, I want to make a deal with you." Through the window, he didn't see the complex emotions in my eyes. He continued, "I want you to announce to the outside world that Jing Shu is your cousin who was chosen to live with you, and write a personal letter recommending her to the Chui family's girls' school." I raised an eyebrow, unable to hide my surprise. The Chui family's girls' school did not discriminate based on background. Those with outstanding virtue and literary talent could enter the school through an examination. In my previous life, I had been in charge of the girls' school for many years and had seen Shin Jingzhu's exam papers in the records. Her writing was clumsy, and her sentences didn't make sense. It was clear that her literary talent was average. Only Pei Yu, with his blind eyes and deaf ears, saw her as a treasure. I snapped back to reality. I couldn't help but ask, what's the reason? If she truly has the ability, she can simply take the exam. Pei Yu gave me a meaningful look. He spoke firmly. The position of crown princess. Seeing my silence, he reluctantly explained, "I will follow my father's wishes and choose you as the main consort. At that time, Jing Shu will be the secondary consort. Once I ascend the throne, I will allow you to feign death and leave the palace. Jing Shu will then naturally become the empress. You have always longed for the mountains and rivers, haven't you? This way, you can live a carefree life." Moonlight shone on his face, filled with longing. I looked down, my expression weary, hiding the mockery in my eyes. Imperial power is supreme. He's not the only one who wants to sit on the dragon throne. The former chancellor's mansion is already in ruins. In my previous life, if it weren't for the Chui clan's heroic efforts, this throne would never have fallen into his hands. But I won't say these things. Instead, I turned to him and said, "What if I refuse?" "Chui Mingyue," Pei Yu shouted harshly. "No one dares to marry you except me. Do not be a greedy snake trying to swallow an elephant. Then I will not marry you." I slowly raised my head, staring into his eyes, and replied word for word, "Your Highness must be too confident. To the point of forgetting one thing, to me, you have never been the only option." With that, I turned around and closed the window. It was done in one fluid motion. I left the crown prince outside, raging in frustration. Inside the room, the candles flickered like beans. They illuminated a pair of deep, dark eyes. Our gazes locked. The owner of those dark eyes raised his bound hands, his tone mocking. "Miss Chui had me bound and brought here in the middle of the night. Was it merely to let me hear your tale of love and hatred with the crown prince?" This man was none other than the horse slave. He had changed his attire, though he still looked like a servant. His refined demeanor was evident without any attempt to hide it. On the way back to the city, I spent 10,000 taels to hire someone to bring him here and hide him in the room. Who would have thought these people were so unreliable? They actually brought him here bound like this. Plus, the crown prince suddenly paid a visit. It delayed us greatly. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I simply closed my mouth. I silently walked to the table and poured myself a cup of cold tea. The cold water went down my throat. My mind cleared a bit. I then took a bold step and said, "Mr. G, I need your help." As soon as the words left my mouth, the man, who had been smug moments ago, suddenly straightened his expression. He blurted out, "Do you recognize me?" Not only do I recognize him, in my previous life, I had accidentally hit his face with a flower. This is something I find hard to bring up. This man is named Ji San, from the Ji clan of Yunzhou. The Ji family was the leading family in the water transport industry, controlling thousands of rivers and canals. During the reign of the previous emperor, the Ji family was intentionally suppressed. The Canal Transport Guild, which followed the Ji family's lead, was still weak. It wasn't until Peiyu ascended the throne. He was an incompetent ruler. The Canal Transport Guild's 10,000-strong navy finally grew strong. They stood on equal footing with the court. Later, Peiyu died. The head of the Ji clan, Ji Yunxing, actually sent Ji San to the palace with a dowry to propose marriage to me. I was so furious that I smashed all the flower pots on the ground. In the process, I accidentally injured his face. The wound was gruesome, and his features were barely recognizable. I only vaguely remembered that he had a pair of very bright eyes. His voice was calm, but the words he spoke were treasonous. He said, "My family head has fallen deeply in love with the Empress Dowager at first sight. He is willing to offer 10,000 naval troops as a dowry to marry the Empress Dowager. We humbly request that the Empress Dowager seriously consider this proposal." I scolded him, calling the Ji family delusional. Little did I know that I would be given a second chance at life. Now, it was I who was eager to marry into their family. I snapped back to reality. I looked at him and spoke solemnly. "I wish to marry your family's patriarch. Please convey this message on my behalf." The words had barely left my mouth. Ji San was taken aback, then furrowed his brow and hesitated. "Miss Chui, may I ask a question?" I gestured for him to continue. After a moment of deliberation, he spoke boldly. "The current head of the Ji family is over 50 years old. Not only does he already have a legitimate wife, but he also has 8 concubines." My heart skipped a beat. I heard him ask doubtfully, "Given your status, are you truly willing to marry him as a concubine?" As the words fell, my face flushed red, because my rebirth had been too sudden. For a moment, I had forgotten that it was now the 28th year of the Qingping era. There were still 3 years before Ji Yunxing would ascend to the position of family head. Seeing my awkward expression, Ji San twisted his limbs, which were sore from being bound, and spoke helplessly. "Miss Chui, is there something you want to say? Why don't you untie me first?" "Ah, I'm sorry." I hurriedly stood up. After some rustling sounds, the ropes fell to the ground. Ji San stood up. As he came closer, I noticed how tall he was, and his gaze, lowered slightly, felt oppressive. I avoided his eyes. After hesitating, I asked, "Is there a man named Ji Yunxing in the Ji clan? Is he the one you're supposed to marry?" Ji San didn't answer but asked instead. I bit my lip and shook my head. "Never mind." Changing the subject, "May I ask the honorable name of Mr. Ji?" In my previous life, he had introduced himself as Ji San. I guessed it was likely a pseudonym. Ji San raised an eyebrow at me and said softly, "Coincidentally, I am the 3rd in rank in my clan, hence the name Ji San." I furrowed my brows, thinking he must not wish to reveal his true name. But the next moment, he spoke slowly. My real name is Ji Yinxing. In that instant, I was stunned in place. So he was actually Ji Yinxing. But in my previous life, I was certain I didn't know him. After sighing for the 10th time, Xiaodao finally couldn't help but ask. Miss, what's wrong? Are you still worried about the crown prince's matter? Of course not. It was just that I couldn't stop thinking about the smirk on Ji Yinxing's face when he agreed to the collaboration. I felt both ashamed and angry. Seeing that I didn't want to say more, Xiaodao handed me a booklet and whispered, that Xinjingzhu is truly ungrateful. The young lady personally wrote a letter recommending her for special admission to the girls' academy. Yet she showed no gratitude and instead used the crown prince's influence to send messengers multiple times, urging the lady to enroll her. All those admitted to the Chui family's girls' academy would receive a unique identity plaque. It bore the words of wisdom their mothers had imparted to them. This tradition was passed down from my great-grandmother and is also called recording the name. Later, when I became empress and oversaw the girls' academy, the one who recorded the names became me. I didn't look at the register. I picked up the brush and wrote on Xian paper. Life is like the wild, and the spring breeze is not free. If she wants this dignity, let her have it. Miss, by compromising like this, you are playing right into her hands. I looked out the window. Autumn was approaching. It's getting cold. I curved my lips and finished the last stroke of my comment. In a leisurely tone, I said, the crown prince wants to elevate her to a high position. Why don't we give him a push? Some things are more cherished when they are unattainable. The opposite may not always be true. Xiao Tao nodded, seeming to understand. Miss, you are right. I couldn't help but smile. The hottest topic in the capital lately was the return of the long-lost distant granddaughter of the former chancellor's family. This granddaughter was none other than Xinjingzhu. The chancellor's family was backed by the crown prince. Though everyone knew the reason, no one dared to speak out. For a time, Xinjingzhu was the talk of the town. Peiyu took her boating, mountain climbing, and to the matchmaker god. He didn't spare a single glance for my dignity. In every tea house across the capital, the topic of conversation was the heartbreaking tale of how the crown prince had cruelly betrayed the Chui family's daughter. In the private room of the Absolute Flavor Pavilion, Ji Yinxing kept glancing at me. By the fourth glance, I couldn't hold back anymore. Mr. Ji, if you have something to say, just speak your mind. Upon hearing this, he cleared his throat and said, if the crown prince were to find out that this play was written by you, wouldn't he be so angry that he'd spit blood? I shook my head. He would indeed spit blood. Because the crown prince's actions not only humiliated me, but also the emperor. Peiyu felt the same way. The rebirth had been too sudden. He had even forgotten that he was still the crown prince. More importantly, he was certain he could inherit the throne as smoothly as he had in his previous life. Thus, his words and actions were reckless. But since I could refuse to marry him, the throne could also fall into another family's hands. Pulling my thoughts back, I asked Ji Yinxing, have you decided on the matter we discussed last time? Mr. Ji? Of course. He answered decisively. He turned around, pulled out a jade pendant from his robe, and presented it to me with both hands. He said earnestly, as long as Miss Chui can help the Ji family escape our current predicament, the 10,000 water soldiers of the Chao gang will be at your disposal in the future. This is the token of our agreement. I took the jade pendant, and the 8-petaled lotus flower representing the Ji clan's crest stood out clearly on it. I felt like laughing, and I did laugh out loud. Peiyu died young. He probably never dreamed of this. The seeds he planted in his previous life are now being used against him by me. Just as I mentioned him, he appeared. As Ji Yinxing and I were about to leave, we came face to face with Peiyu. He was surrounded by a group of young nobles, heading toward the second-floor private room. Our eyes met. His expression darkened. Someone shouted, "Hey!" I didn't hear that Miss Shin invited Cui Mingyue to the banquet. Everyone turned to look at me in confusion. At that moment, Pei Yu's gaze swept past me and landed on Ji Yinxing, who was keeping his head down. He deigned to speak first. "You come from a distinguished family. At least behave yourself and don't associate with such lowly scum." I was about to retort in frustration. "Your Highness." The man who had spoken earlier suddenly interjected. "Everyone, look at that man's build. He resembles the stable hand that Cui Mingyue took a liking to during the hunting expedition." The room erupted in commotion. Hostile glances shot in my direction. Ji Yinxing had entered the capital under a false name. To avoid drawing attention, he had spent most of his time disguised as a stable hand. I furrowed my brows slightly but made no defense. I merely exchanged a silent glance with him. Before anyone could react, a soft, delicate female voice drifted into everyone's ears. No wonder His Highness searched everywhere for this person afterward and couldn't find him. It turns out he was already hidden away by Miss Cui. It was Xinjing. She pushed through the crowd, smiling as she walked over to stand beside Pei Yu. Dressed in fine silk robes, her head adorned with jewels that shone brightly, she stood in stark contrast to my plain appearance. I had no desire to engage in a verbal dispute with her, but she insisted on provoking me. I smiled faintly. If I recall correctly, today is the day of the Academy's evaluations. Among the many women attending the banquet, there were several familiar faces. Xinjing followed my gaze. A faint smile curved her lips. She couldn't help but boast proudly. "The academic evaluations are held once a month. It's a waste of everyone's time. The teachers don't mind, but we all do. It's rare for us to gather like this. Why ruin the mood? Miss Cui? Fool!" I couldn't help but blurt out. Among them were even those from impoverished families who relied on the exam bonuses to survive. Xinjing had been forming cliques at the academy lately, causing chaos. Now she was encouraging the students to skip class. Just as I expected. She's a lost cause. Truly unfit for any important role. Seeing my disgusted expression, Xinjing's eyes suddenly filled with tears. Pei Yu took it all in. He stood in front of Xinjing like a mother hen protecting her chicks. His words filled with reproach. "Cui Mingyue, you're so arrogant. Don't even mention that this girls' academy hasn't been taken over by you yet. Right now, you're just a female student here. Who are you to judge right from wrong?" "Of course." I spoke casually and walked out. As we passed each other, I taunted. "But this academy still bears the Cui surname. You're not even a student. So what qualifies you to meddle in my affairs?" Pei Yu's expression darkened abruptly. The next moment, he suddenly reached out his hand, pointing at Ji Yinxing, who was about to step down the stairs. He spoke in a harsh tone. "You. Look up. In my previous life, the Ji family had been lying low for years. The head of the Ji family was even more mysterious, with no portraits circulating among the common folk. Therefore, Pei Yu did not recognize Ji Yinxing, but I dared not take the risk. At present, the emperor was keeping a close eye on the Chao gang, and was eager for an opportunity to crack down on the Ji family. If he were to discover that the Ji family had secretly sent someone to the capital to bribe officials, it would be exactly what he wanted. Caught between a rock and a hard place, Ji Yinxing slowly raised his head. He revealed an ordinary, unremarkable square face, the kind that wouldn't stand out in a crowd. He deliberately lowered his voice and asked, "Your Highness, what is the reason for summoning this servant?" He was respectful but not overly subservient. Pei Yu spoke impatiently. "I happen to be in need of a horse trainer. From today onward, you will follow me." "I refuse." Before Ji Yinxing could respond, I flatly refused. Cui Mingyue. Don't be ungrateful. Bringing a horse slave along to parade through the streets, have you considered your teacher's reputation? The teacher he referred to was my father. I looked at him with a mocking expression. Back at the hunting ground, when I confessed my feelings for the horse slave, Your Highness didn't say that. His expression stiffened slightly. I raised my voice. Your Highness said that both you and the woman from the Cui family already have someone you love. If you force yourselves together, you'll only add another pair of unhappy lovers to this world. His Majesty was once young as well. He must understand your thoughts. You don't want to miss out on the one you love and regret it for the rest of your life. Finally, I looked at him, my expression serious. Fortunately, the karmic bond between His Highness and me was severed in time. Otherwise, the one who would have regretted it for the rest of his life would have been me. If I could start over, I would repeat those heartless words to him exactly as they were spoken. Before a cup of tea could be finished, the storyteller in the tea house had moved from tales of the prince's romantic exploits to stories of family feuds. Rumors were terrifying, especially since the emperor was already prone to suspicion. That night, Ji Yinxing appeared in my room. According to our spies, after dinner, the emperor summoned the crown prince to the rear palace for a meeting. Less than half an hour later, we heard arguing from inside. It is said that the emperor, in a fit of rage, drew his sword and wounded the crown prince. The entire city is now under curfew, and the imperial physicians were summoned to the palace in the middle of the night. His Majesty has ordered that all news be sealed off and that the crown prince be treated with all available medical resources. I couldn't hide my surprise. What kind of deep hatred could warrant such harsh treatment? The place where the crown prince is being treated is completely surrounded, and my men can't get any information. I laughed awkwardly. It had only been less than 2 hours since dinner, and the Ji family had already received the news. No wonder even His Majesty fears them so much. Perhaps he heard the hesitation in my voice. Ji Yinxing chuckled and took a step closer to me. Without some real skills, how could one make a deal with the Cui family? Under the candlelight, his gaze was deep, filled with my reflection. I was no innocent maiden. In the first 2 years of my marriage to Peiyu, we had lived a carefree life. So I could tell at a glance. Ji Yinxing's gaze was that of a man looking at a woman. As if sensing my unease, he averted his eyes, cleared his throat, and looked elsewhere. He said in a hoarse voice, "The crown prince is seriously injured. Cui girls' move to use someone else's knife to kill is truly cunning. Within a few days, the court will likely be in turmoil." I never expected the emperor to be so impulsive. He actually resorted to violence. Just as Ji Yinxing had predicted, the turmoil came swiftly, and it was all caused by Shinjingzhu. It was just a trivial matter. Shinjingzhu came from a peasant family. Now that she had risen to power, her entire family had been elevated. Her cousin had dared to harass the daughter of Sun, the official from the censorate, in broad daylight. The girl was as fierce as her father. She threw herself to her death at the palace gates. It happened just as the officials were leaving the court. Seeing the horrific scene and the blood-stained letter left by the daughter of Sun Daren, the crowd grew furious. They rushed into the palace to lodge a complaint. But Shinjingzhu, relying on her favor with the crown prince, had been acting arrogantly and tyrannically at the academy. The daughter of Sun Daren was a righteous person who loved to make friends. She already had a few close friends. Upon returning home, they heard that their friend had been harassed by a ruffian in broad daylight. According to the laws of our dynasty, he should have been imprisoned. Yet not only did he remain free, instead, he grew even more brazen, harassing the families of officials. It's all because she's backed by the crown prince. Exactly. Mrs. Cui. We understand your reluctance to take in such a person. But now that she's become so despicable, We simply cannot bear to live under the same roof with her anymore. Let's leave the Chui family's school to avoid ending up like Miss Sun. When everyone came to find my mother in a fit of righteous anger, I was standing nearby, listening. Once everyone had calmed down, my mother turned to me and asked, Mingyue, how do you think this matter should be handled? I knew this was my mother's test for me. After a moment's thought, I blurted out, in the past, the late empress once bestowed an iron tablet upon our grandmother. This iron tablet can hold the emperor accountable and hold officials accountable. Since Shin girl claims to be the mistress of the Eastern Palace, it is the prince's fault. He should step forward and give an explanation. But the crown prince couldn't come out. His injuries were too severe, and he remained unconscious. The emperor feared that if this matter were to spread, it would damage his prestige, so he falsely claimed that Peiyu had fallen seriously ill. Moreover, he had always been dissatisfied with Shinjingzhu. He immediately issued an edict, exiling the entire Shin clan, regardless of gender, to the harsh and barren lands of the northern deserts. They were forbidden to return to the capital for all eternity. Shinjingzhu caused a commotion several times. She demanded to see the crown prince. She was beaten severely several times and eventually submitted. The crown prince had been missing for too long. Rumors began to spread. The court was in upheaval. Petitions urging the crown prince to attend court flew into the palace like snowflakes. Rumors even began to circulate in the streets. It was said that the emperor might depose the crown prince. The emperor was overwhelmed with concerns. He had no time to suppress the canal gang. The Ji family gained a breather. They immediately began equipping their ships with ice blades. Ji Yinxing sent a messenger to express his gratitude. In the letter, he mentioned that the position of family head was already within his grasp. Finally, he asked, our dynasty has not experienced a cold snap in a century. Equipping ships with ice blades is a significant expense. Are you certain this is the right course of action? I looked up at the gloomy sky. Based on the timeline, soon, a cold snap would catch everyone off guard. In my previous life, the canal gang was severely weakened by this incident. We lost the strength to oppose the court. And this time, I will take advantage of Peiyu's indulgence in love to completely cut off all his retreat routes. Half a month later, the crown prince slowly regained consciousness. Just as everyone was anxiously wondering how to explain the matter involving Shinjingzhu, he suddenly seemed like a different person, forcing himself to stand despite his weakened body. He rode a carriage to the Chui family and demanded to see me. In the water pavilion, Peiyu was wrapped in a thick fox fur, his face pale. He was so weak he could barely sit up. Mingyue, I was momentarily confused recently. Please don't hold it against me. Shall we continue with our engagement? I couldn't hide my surprise. I had thought he was here to confront me. But instead, he asked to marry me. He took out a scroll of bright yellow paper. He unfolded it. The large characters Imperial Marriage Decree stung my eyes. Peiyu covered his chest and said with difficulty, before leaving the palace, I obtained the imperial decree for our marriage from my father, the emperor. Mingyue, I am sincere. Please give me another chance. I stared at his eyes, which held no trace of sincerity. I almost laughed out loud. Peiyu. I curved my lips. Let me guess, could it be that the recent rumors in the capital about the emperor intending to depose the crown prince are true? Add to that his recent disappearance, which had already caused some of the ministers to lose faith in him. If he loses the support of the aristocratic clans, he may not be far from being deposed. As I finished speaking, visibly, his face paled another shade. We made a deal. I promised you the title of crown princess. Once I ascend the throne, I will grant you freedom. You clearly agreed to this. Now you're going back on your word. Are you mocking me? When did I ever agree to that? You, Chui Mingyue. What do you want? As long as I ascend to the throne, even a fiefdom will be yours. I didn't answer but asked instead. Have you seen Miss Shin? Her? What about her? Peiyu spoke with a guarded tone. I smiled indifferently. Nothing. She made a mistake, her entire clan has been exiled. What did you say? He suddenly stood up. But due to severe blood loss. He stumbled backward, his back crashing heavily against the railing. He let out a pained cry. He then coughed up a mouthful of blood. Seeing him like this, I still felt unsatisfied. I continued to provoke him. So all those words you spoke by the 3 live stone, that if there was a next life, you would never betray your true love, were all just empty promises. A selfish person like you could never have been sincere. Hearing this, Peiyu was filled with shock. His legs gave way, and he collapsed to the ground. The matter of the emperor injuring the crown prince could no longer be concealed. Before the cold front arrived, it had already become the topic of discussion in every tea house. By the time the impeachment documents from the censorate reached the emperor's desk, he was still in a daze. During the morning court session, the elderly grand secretary's son, who had lost his daughter, spoke harshly, criticizing him so severely that he was ashamed and wanted to die. The emperor breaks the law and is subject to the same punishment as the common people. The emperor has received the mandate of heaven, yet he has committed such a brutal act. It is utterly shocking. Where is the dignity of a wise ruler? He is clearly a tyrant. The crown prince is obsessed with romantic affairs, allowing others to commit atrocities without intervention, and has yet to account for his actions. Such foolishness is unworthy of his position. We implore the emperor to appoint a new crown prince without delay, and announce it to the world to soothe the hearts of the people. The emperor remained silent, but he heard every word. Peiyu had intended to use his injury to force the emperor to abdicate, but he never expected that he would end up shooting himself in the foot. In a fit of rage, he fled the capital in the dead of night, gathered 5,000 troops from the city garrison, and surrounded the palace. That night, the capital was blanketed by a rare, heavy snowfall. The blood from the palace coup was covered by the snow. All was quiet, as if no battle had ever taken place. But I knew. Peiyu had been defeated. He fled south in panic. But the wind was strong and the snow was heavy, making the journey difficult. By the time he had gathered his memories of the blizzard, the 10,000 naval troops of the Chao gang had already broken through the ice and were heading north. The capital city had just undergone a fierce battle, leaving its defenses vulnerable. With my inside help, we easily broke through the palace guards. Without shedding a drop of blood, we captured the capital. When I saw Peiyu again, he was on a flower-decorated boat. Though still handsome, he had been severely wounded, and his every movement was as fragile as a willow in the wind. Perhaps he had been tortured mercilessly. His face was pale, and there were bruises around his eyes. As I passed by the ship's edge, he saw me. His entire body nearly leaned out the window, shouting my name at the top of his lungs. But soon, someone covered his mouth and dragged him back inside. The window was shut tightly. Soon after, the sounds of fistfights echoed through the air. I kept my eyes straight ahead and continued walking forward. Xiaodao followed behind, her voice filled with sorrow. Miss, how did the former crown prince end up in such a state? Of course, it was my doing, but I didn't say it out loud. After being reborn, I clearly understood one thing. That was that Peiyu hated me, and he hated the Chui family even more. Once he ascended the throne, the Chui family would be doomed. The facts turned out exactly as I had suspected. Ji Yinxing's men discovered that Peiyu had mentioned it countless times while making love to Shen Jingzhu. Once he ascends the throne, he will marry me off to the lowest of the low, a horse slave. Then I will grant him his wish. I will put on a show with the fake horse slave to lower his guard. And then deliver the final blow. On the day I left the capital, Ji Yunxing, now the new emperor, came to see me off. He asked if I promised to love only you for the rest of my life. Would you stay in the capital and rule the world with me? No. I answered bluntly. In my previous life, I was trapped within palace walls for half a lifetime. This time, I finally escaped the sea of suffering. I don't want to jump back in. Seeing my resolute expression, Ji Yunxing sighed wryly but did not press the matter. He said, I once promised you that 10,000 naval troops would be at your command, and this jade pendant with an 8-petaled lotus flower is the token of that promise. Seeing this pendant is like seeing the master of the house. From now on, they will only obey you. Though shocked by his honesty, I did not refuse. This was what I deserved. After bidding farewell, I mounted my horse swiftly, never looking back, heading toward the mountains and rivers in my heart. This life, I wanted to live it differently. Ji Yunxing's side story. I had a dream. In the dream, there was a graceful and elegant woman. I watched her study poetry and literature diligently, following the rules and becoming a model for all women. But she wasn't happy. I didn't know why seeing her unhappy made me feel a bitter emotion, until she became a widow in the palace. I went to ask for her hand in marriage. That was the first time I saw her express such vivid emotions. But it was also the last time. She died. She followed her deceased husband into the afterlife. She was truly devoted. That was my last impression of her. This dream repeated itself until I saw her again in the suburbs of the capital. She was alive and well. It turned out she was a woman from the Chui family, and a bold and daring one at that. She had sent a silver note worth 10,000 taels to have me summoned. That was 10,000 taels. Was I really worth that much? Out of respect for the 10,000 taels, I had my men bind me tightly and send me to her bedroom, watching her feigned composure as she twitched her lips. I felt quite pleased. What? She said she wanted to marry me. I felt even better. But in the end, the great cause had been accomplished. She said she did not wish to be confined within palace walls. The marriage was annulled. I reluctantly sent her away. Upon returning to the palace, I sat in the Qinghe Hall, where she had lived in her previous life. For 3 days, my mind was filled with her every smile and frown. On the 4th day, I came to a decision. Let whoever wants to be emperor take the throne. I'm done with this. After handing the throne over to the wisest and most humble of my clan's young men, I rushed after Cui Mingyue without delay. I had secretly read the words she had written. Life is like the wild, the spring wind blows freely. I care not for the seasons or whether the wind blows freely. I only want that moon in the sky to remain forever free.